Good morning and welcome to today's press conference. My name is Stefan Forsberg and I have the great privilege of being the executive and artistic director for this beautiful concert hall with its orchestra, the Royal Stockholm Philharmonic. This concert hall is built as a temple for music, particularly for classical music. It's built as a home for the Royal Stockholm Philharmonic Orchestra. But it is also built as venue for the annual Nobel Prize ceremony. And we are therefore deeply honored over the possibility also hosting the Birgit Nilsson Prize Award ceremony in 2014. And I will now leave the podium and the microphone to the president of the Birgit Nilsson Foundation, Professor Dr. Rupert Reich.
Stefan, thank you very much for your very kind introduction. I'd like to welcome you all to today's press conference. I'm doubly appreciative of being here in view of this not very kind weather outside. But I can assure you we are trying our very best to change this by noon. I hope we can succeed. And as a matter of fact, we had a group that does a sun dance outside. So I hope this is going to help. Before I get into a brief statement on the Birgit Nilsson Prize, I'd like you to introduce the neighbor to my left, Mr. Grossbauer, the president of the Vienna Philharmonic, and Mr. Helsberg to my right, the former president of the Philharmonic. And I'm very happy and very appreciative that they're both here and are both at the ceremony tonight. This will, of course, also give you the opportunity to ask whatever questions you have on your mind. If I may preface their remarks, I would like to emphasize what this prize is about, and I'll be very brief because you can read this all in the program if you want to have more details, or alternatively, any of you are welcome to call me at any time you have something on your mind. The prize ultimately serves the perpetuation of this wonderful art form, an art form like no other that crosses language barriers, national barriers, cultural barriers, and doesn't need to take the bypass over the language, but speaks to people's heart directly. So I think in terms of uniting cultures and people and countries, there's no other art that's as effective as this one. This was also, among other things, on Birgit Nilsson's mind. But to do this in the best possible manner, you have to recognize the contribution that is made by those who make the most important, lasting achievements to sustain this art form. There was no prize in that magnitude before, and it's endowed according to what it strives to achieve, to those who combine or who build the bridge between the composer, who basically left written pages, dotted pages behind, and the audience who has to get the message for which you need the interpreter. Now, if you want to do this as effectively as possible, you have to recognize and reward people who do this at the very best. This is why the prize is an excellency prize and not a, what you might call it, promotional prize or something for young talents, of which there are enough prizes around. The second thing that was very much on Birgit Nilsson's mind, she was abhorred to see how in the business, quote unquote, already late 80s, young singers were thrown to the wolves into productions that were way beyond their means at the time, burned out, and then thrown aside, and were never able to reach the full potential that they could have achieved if they had built it more slowly and more carefully. So she wanted to provide an incentive for young singers to signify what is out there when you build yourself up slowly. If you want to use a metaphor from sports, it's supposed to reward those who make it to the finish line and not shell out money at the starting position. The criteria, of course, are more or less self-explanatory. They go into striving for this. You can read them on our website or in the program. And again, if you want any more details, I'd be glad to answer your questions. With that, I would like to hand the word over to Mr. Grossberg And after his statement and something Mr. Helsberg will say after that, you're invited to field your questions, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Reisch. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me express my deep gratitude on behalf of all my colleagues to the chairman and the committee members of the Birgit Nilsson Foundation for the honor to be awarded for the Nilsson Prize 2014. For the first time, this prize does not go on a single individual, but rather to an entire ensemble. It gives me great pleasure to inform you that the orchestra came to the unanimous decision that the entire proceeds of the Birgit Nilsson Prize will be dedicated to scholarly analysis, digitalization of, and expanded access to the historical archives of the Vienna Philharmonic. It is our goal to provide access for an interested public to all the treasures contained in these archives. The Vienna Philharmonic Historic Archive has existed since the orchestra's inception in 1842. In 1979, Clemens Helsberg was appointed the first Vienna Philharmonic historical archivist. He's also a violinist in and former president of the Vienna Philharmonic. The original setting was in a smaller section of the Vienna Philharmonic library in the Musikverein. As the collection grew, the archive was moved to a separate room in the Musikverein, and in the year 2000 was moved into the Haus der Musik in Vienna, where the Vienna Philharmonic Museum is now housed. Currently, this space is too small and cramped, allowing no room for growth. It has long been a dream of the Vienna Philharmonic to have a transparent archive which is more accessible and more readily open to the public, to entice young people to view and study this history of almost 2 centuries, and to provide an environment conducive to scholarly research. This prize will enable the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra to establish a permanent home for its vast archive, which has grown appreciably over the past decades. As the Vienna Philharmonic moves forward into the next century, its historic context and legacy will now be assured. The Vienna Philharmonic is convinced that we can only shape the future when we remember the past by documenting it. Let me just shortly throw our attention to some other projects of the Vienna Philharmonic is supporting since many years. In 2012, subsequent to the disastrous Fukushima accident, the orchestra founded together with Suntory Hall the Music Aid Fund, which enables children and young people to study music in the active zones in Japan. This fund was provided with 100 million Japanese yen from Vienna Philharmonic side. Further on, we provide an annual donation of 100,000 euro on the occasion of New Year's concert. This sum is given to several institutions upon application, for example, banning landmines, clown doctors, Amnesty International, and many local care projects. The Vienna Philharmonic contributes instruments to the Symphony por el Peru, is involved with the Concordia Foundation in Romania, and last not least, over the orchestra frequently play for bone marrow transplant recipients whilst they are being isolated. The Birgit Nilsson Prize provides our orchestra with a valuable contribution to our aims, and we are extremely grateful for the decision to bestow this award upon the Vienna Philharmonic. The Vienna Philharmonic considers itself a representative of Austria, the land of music, a country in which so much timeless music has originated. We sustain this legacy. This is our heartbeat, and this we take pride. It is incredible what music can accomplish. For example, what happens when people suddenly hear music? They stop, they listen, they no longer need words for comprehension. In their introspection, their individual hearts are touched by the uniqueness of the musical moment. Music possesses this special power. It possesses the energy to reach people. It reaches from heart to heart. It links individuals and peoples. This is wondrous. No other art form is capable of this so clearly. Our orchestra acknowledges this special energy. It is this energy which connects us with the person of Birgit Nilsson. Her voice was like a sun ray, more, she was the sun. Impressing, touching, full of positive energy, and her voice was a gift for arts and humanity forever. Thank you.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely convinced that as a single person as well as an institution, one needs some personalities who serve as a marker, who show the way you want to go. In this sense, Birgit Nilsson was not an idol. She was an ideal. I owe a big part of my musical way and therefore my musical life and career to her. I was a boy of 10 years old, a 10-year-old boy, when I heard her for the first time in the Vienna State Opera in Siegfried, which is a long opera for a 10-year-old boy, also for a 62-year-old boy. And frankly said, I was more interested in the dragon, but in the cast. But this last act, this awakening of Brünnhilde, it is in my whole, now since more than half a century, and Rutbert Reisch knows what I'm speaking about, because we spent some time on the standing gallery in the State Opera. For me, there were only two personalities, two singers who filled the stage with their personality before they even opened their mouth. There was Birgit and this was Hans Hotter. And in this performance, both of them were on stage. And yeah, by the way, Karajan conducting and Wolfgang Windgassen singing. And, but the dragon did not appear. But it was such an impression that I really can say it changed my life. From the middle of the 60s, it was no performance of her at the State Opera in Vienna, which I missed. I think the same as Rutbert did. And I was glad enough the last 8 years she was singing at the State Opera that I could then, that I could play in the orchestra pit, and so was closer to her. I had the honor, the privilege of presenting Birgit Nilsson with the certificate of honorary membership at the Vienna Philharmonic in 1999. And I must say, it is, yeah, at this time I was 2 years acting as chairman. Now after finishing, it was a highlight within this 17 years of my tenure to present the idol, the ideal of your musical life, to present this honorary membership of your own orchestra. I can tell you, when she came, and I had the same experience as at the Stehplatz, at the standing gallery, as well as then in the orchestra. When she was there, the whole house was a different one. She changed everything. And the fascinating thing was, whether on stage or in privacy, I didn't know her that well as Rutbert knew her, but we spent an unforgettable evening at home at dinner. She was never a diva, but she was the center, the natural center, as Andreas used to say, the sun. And yeah, and it was true. She brought everything, every person, her colleagues on stage, the orchestra, the audience, on a different, on a higher level. And for this experience, I will be grateful all the rest of my life. She remains being, together with David Oestrach and Hans Hotter, my ideal in music, in respects of music. And it is really, really an incredible emotional moment for me that after 52 years after this first encounter with this goddess, that our orchestra now is awarded with the Birgit Nilsson Prize. Thank you.